I've been playing Watcher of Realms for about 5 months now, so I've got quite a lot of experience. I've made loads of videos and guides. I've talked to a lot of the community, lots of players, free players, whales, guild masters, standard players, players on other servers, beta players. I have quite a broad reach of experience at this point. I think I'm pretty comfortable in my opinion. So I've been trying to hold back my criticisms and critique for a long time because I wanted to be sure that I really knew what I was talking about, or at least that I was comfortable with what I was saying. And I've kind of gotten to the point where now I want to share my thoughts on the game, specifically what I don't like, mainly with the hopes that perhaps it will reach the developers' ears and perhaps it will add to the cacophony of sounds of other people's complaints. I try to withhold heavy criticism because I believe if it's overdone, it will be less listened to. I believe that if you choose the time to have a precise criticism, it's more likely to be heard and listened to. I didn't really want to overwhelm them with constant barrages of feedback. So this video is going to be going over my feedback on what I think Watcher of Realms is currently missing and some suggestions at the end on what I think could be done to solve some of these problems. It's not going to be an overly positive video, but I would just like to preface it by saying I do still like the game a lot. There are a lot of positives to the game. Just to quickly name a few so you don't think this is just a pure despair video. 1, I think the campaign content is very enjoyable. I love having hard and expert with some extra different difficulties to it, such as only having 6 heroes, not letting heroes die, etc. It's a really fun campaign in this game and I really have enjoyed it. I think they give you quite a generous amount of summons for the second point. For the third one, I think they have some really good quality of life features, such as allowing you to star up heroes using XP potions and using the quick star up system. I think it's really nice compared to the typical fodder farming that other gachas have. I think it's great that we have community managers such as Elm and Homie Drebo on Discord that actually listen to us and do push our feedback towards the developers, so thank you guys, appreciate you always. It's great to see the developers implementing some of the features we've suggested, so there's already been a few go into the game that myself and others have suggested, so it's great to see that the developers do actually hear our feedback, so do appreciate that. I've been enjoying some of the new content that's coming out, especially Gear Raid 2. I think that the 19 to 21 have been very enjoyable to do. So there's a bunch of positives about the game that I do like in general. But now I'm going to talk about the things that I don't like, and then we'll talk about some of the suggestions I have think might improve it. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the things that I am not happy with in the game as it is currently, and things I would like them to solve in some way. So first, this is pretty much the most prevalent issue that everyone will notice if you played the game for more than a month. There is a massive lack of late game content and late game progression systems. You kind of just have a slow grind to increase gear, but without really a reason. It doesn't take massively long to 1 key Nightmare 4 in Guild Boss, which is pretty much one of the hardest content right now. In general, there is just a massive lack of endgame progression. There's nothing to work towards. You have the Pantheon system, but who cares about the Pantheon? You just do some mindless autoing a few times a day, and then you slowly tick up benefits. But it's just something you do because you're supposed to, but it's not engaging in any way. So there's a massive lack of stuff to work towards. The second point I would make, and maybe this is a bit specific, I think there's not enough fusion heroes. There's only 3 fusion heroes in the game. There's no mage, there's no fighter, and they're quite important. And if you notice, there are a lot of players struggling with Gear Raid 2 and with Gear Raid 1. And I think that's because you can't really suggest a fusion hero to help them out. Everything is very pull dependent. Adding to this, all the heroes they're adding are pretty much legendary heroes. We need more epic heroes, and we need epic heroes to be better and more competitive with legendary heroes. At the moment, this is kind of branching onto another point, heroes are way too powerful. Your progression in this game is pretty much entirely pulled to your roster. What heroes you have kind of determines how strong your account is. You can farm all the gear in the world, but an epic team without a lord is not going to beat a legendary team that has a lord. It's just so hard to do that. And certain legendaries shine so hard that even I won't attack certain teams in Arena. I have a very, very stacked team. I have very heavy gear farm. And if I see a Hatsuit and an Airborne Day, I won't touch it. And likewise, if someone attacks my single target team and they don't have a Salazar, they lose. If I attack a team and one of us doesn't have Viona in the group stage, the one with Viona will win. In this game, it's not like, he has loads of legendaries, but I farm gear, so I'm strong. No, he will win. He has the legendaries. There's way too much weight of power in legendary heroes. Gear farming kind of feels pointless, and kind of stretching this point a bit further. Normally in a gacha, you kind of say to players, look, save your diamonds, don't just summon, farm gear, that will progress your account faster. I personally believe it's the opposite in Watcher of Realms. I think you really need to get the heroes. Summoning heroes will progress your account much faster than farming gear, especially considering how little gear runs you get out of what is now basically 60 diamonds for 200 stamina. So that's another point, my second point, which is to try and encapsulate it. We can't fuse many epic heroes, and the epic heroes that are in the game cannot compete with the legendary heroes because the legendary heroes are so overwhelmingly powerful. And branching off of that, legendary heroes being so powerful means that gear farming kind of loses its weight. The benefit is only there as an addition, but really the core hero is what makes the power of your team. So I think it kind of eats away at some of the progression of the game because you're just waiting for the big pulls. Now my third point, there aren't many mechanics in the hero / in the combat. So the stage that I'm altering in the background is probably one of the more complex stages. I've done some videos on this if you want to check them out. It's Gear Raid 2, 19, and this is 20. This is Gear Raid 2 stage 20 right now. But 19 to 21 has this level of combat. Everything I'm placing here is very meticulous, very particularly placed. Every hero there serves a specific purpose. Most content in this game doesn't have any mechanics like this. There's just an enemy and you kill it. Look at Gear Raid 1, you just kill it. There is very few strategies you can adopt in Gear Raid 1. You just have to murder them. In Guild Boss, how much damage can you do in a short window of time, and can you pop the dragon's shield easily? It lacks in depth, it lacks in heroes, it lacks in mechanics, and I think the thing that always bothers me is whenever they release a new hero like Silas, you look at Silas, what does he do? He does damage. He has a passive that increases his damage, and he has another passive that increases his damage, and he has an ultimate that increases his damage. He just does damage. He offers no mechanics. He adds nothing to the game, which means there are two options with Silas. Either one, he sucks, or two, he probably power creeps the game. I guess maybe they land him perfectly in the middle, but I mean, he just does damage. Either he's weaker or he's stronger, right? So either he sucks or he power creeps. So I'm not fond of this constant, let's just add new heroes who do damage. And I have some thoughts on this, but again, I'll share them at the end on my ideas on how to resolve this issue. My next point is Lord benefits are too powerful. Not pulling a key faction Lord kind of just screws your account for a long time. Try clearing Nightmare 4 and getting all rewards with one key without having an Infernal Lord. It's dang hard. On my server, I got the furthest out of anyone without having an Infernal Lord, and that was adopting some cheesy strategies, that was with an incredibly geared team, and that was having a near perfect team outside of missing that Lord. I didn't have a Zealotune, I didn't have a Pyros, and I was managing to hit a 14k blood and get the third ticket, but I couldn't get to the fourth, and I'm sure it's possible, but dang, it would be so hard. I got Pyros, and because he's a faction lord, and him doing like barely any damage, he was doing like 6 million damage, just having him as a faction lord boosted my team straight to 20k. Just the next day, 20k blood, instantly. It kind of sucks. All of my work, all of my months of grinding, all of my team comp, all of my specific timings of placements and ultimate, and like really doing my work to make sure I optimized everything, was just beaten by having a Pyros on my account. And if you don't pull him, you're kind of just massively weaker, which I don't think is cool. It doesn't really give players options other than, hey, spend money and try and get this hero. I understand that's the point of these games, you guys got to make money, but I think you have to choose when to take those stands and when not to. Like, people are going to wail because stuff's new, right? I don't think you have to punish people for just playing the game as well. Typically in these games, you can actually clear most content without having, you know, this specific super strong hero. You should be able to do it with a fairly reasonable roster. You shouldn't have to have one of two heroes to clear a dungeon. I think that kind of sucks design-wise. And once you do pull one of these lords, well, now your account's just permanently stronger. You don't even need to do much with them. You can just have them. You don't even need to place them most of the time. So it isn't really a fun mechanic. It doesn't really add anything to the game. It just means that either your account is strong or it's not. Either certain teams are available to you or they're not. And again, it kind of feeds into the whole heroes are way too strong compared to gear. And moving on to my last few points, PvP and the arena system suck, to be frank. They are really poor in this game. PvP and arena at the moment in Watcher of Realms consist of a mirror match. You kind of know if you're going to win or lose immediately upon queuing for a fight. There is no real option for ambiguity here. You just attack a guy and he has a hero you don't that's powerful, so you lose. It's so rare that you see someone who is a similar power to you, and by similar I mean like 50k BP, and they have a Hatset and airborne and you don't have a Hatset and you still beat them. Unless they're being pretty unfortunate or pretty poor with their placements, they're going to smash you. Same in group arena. If they have a Vienna or a Morrigan and you don't, then you lose. In single target, if they have a Zealotune and a Salazar down and you don't have a Salazar, or if you only have one of those two, you're going to really suffer to fight against those guys. Arena is really quite poor in this game at the moment, which is a huge problem because these games tend to thrive off of Arena. There is talk, they've mentioned that they're working on Guild versus Guild, and as much as I would love to have Guild versus Guild, I think this game has an amazing community and I really enjoy the guilds on my server. I think Guild versus Guild would be a nightmare. If it's anything like the current Arena system, it's not going to be particularly enjoyable. The system just isn't there. The current format that we are using for Arena is just bland. You stick your team versus their team, you both do the same thing, there is no interaction across lanes. What's the point? I just don't see what the point is. We're just doing the same thing and one of us wins. You might as well just have a high score and then you click and you see if they've got a lower score than you and then you click win. I don't know, I just don't see the benefit of it. I don't know anyone who enjoys the Arena in this game. There's no difference between an offensive team and a defensive team, it's just the same team. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but if anyone who's done arena in a game could understand, there's a lot of problems with it. It's a tricky one because of the nature of a tower defense game. And now getting on to two of the biggest, most painful issues in the game that I kind of wanted to leave to the end because I'm going to be throwing a lot of shade. The first one is that the developers seem obsessed with killing our stamina supply. I have been resisting making a video about this because I made a couple of videos about the XP changes, including the stamina. And I didn't really want to kind of just complain into the abyss about it. We all know it's a problem at the moment. I've talked to some of the community managers about it and messaged them with concerns from you guys in my YouTube channel, from some of the guild masters, and from other players on my server. Everyone is suffering at the moment from the lack of stamina. And the thing that makes it worse is it seems like they're selling packs, so it does definitely feel like it's just a cash grab, which does not sit right with the community. But anyway, the developers seem to be obsessed with reducing our stamina. They've made it harder to get it. The stamina potions, they've removed them from the idol rewards. They've made them less likely from guild boss to some degree. I think you can get flat stamina instead. They've basically ripped it out of the shop altogether, and now they've replaced it with flat stamina. So, pound for pound, you can still get stamina, but it's not in the form that you can stockpile a huge stamina potion. And it is actually quite a problem because most people will choose to play in bursts. They will say, oh look, there's an event, Farm Gear Raid 2 for an Oracle's Trial. I'm going to compete and try and get in the top 3, top 5, whatever. And with the changes, you can't really do that anymore because you can't stockpile huge stamina pots. I've spent 2 huge stamina pots since this change landed, like nearly 2 weeks ago now. And I still have, I think I have like 14 or 15 huge stamina pots. I have barely any at all. Like right now I'm farming this many stages because I just have like 600 flat stamina. So I don't really have a choice. I have to use it now, or I'm going to be going into my overdraft and I'm not going to be regenerating passively stamina, which isn't very efficient, but maybe I didn't want to play now. Maybe I wanted to play this evening, but I would know if I waited till the evening I'll be wasting 50 stamina or something, which sounds minimal, but every day wasting 50 stamina adds up quite a lot, right? So it feels like they're controlling when we play the game, which I don't quite like. And it's definitely a huge loss in stamina. So I've personally been playing the game massively less, which is why my videos are actually less frequent now. Because I don't really feel like I can do that much. I'm pretty restricted in how much I can play and how much I can achieve in a day. And yeah, I barely farmed gear. I've barely farmed anything. I do this once a day and then I turn my aim off. That's pretty much it. I do my daily stuff, I use my stamina, and then I stop playing. Because the stamina has been so heavy. And the reason why I preface this by saying that they seem determined to reduce stamina is because I'm sure if we complain hard enough, if people review bomb the game, if people cancel their subscription passes, then they will backtrack on this change to some degree. However, this happened before. Only a couple of months ago, they did something similar where they ripped the huge stamina pots out of the store, people complained, and then they put them back in. And then lo and behold, a couple months later, fast forward to now, they've done it again. So this worries me massively because it shows there is a clear desire to reduce the stamina we have as players. And I think that's a very, very poor thing. I think you should accept that your players want to play the darn game. Let them play the game. I understand maybe you want to get stamina to a degree, so you have to choose a bit between summoning and stamina. And you can say, well, you can buy stamina for 60 diamonds. The problem is 60 diamonds is actually a lot. And as I was saying, summons tend to get you more progression on your account. Pulling a Lord is going to give you way more progression than 10,000 stamina will. Just absolutely. Maybe 10,000 has huge stamina pots. Like, it's barely going to make a difference. Like, a Lord is huge. A few gear pieces that roll poorly is not that great. It takes a lot of farming to get a good piece late game. But you just need to get lucky a couple of times and you can get an amazing roster. So the balance at the moment of diamonds versus a summon, 88 diamonds for a summon versus 60 diamonds for a single refill. Bearing in mind that will get you 7 runs of this dungeon. A huge stamina pot for 60 diamonds will get you 7 runs. I don't think at the moment the conversion is very good. I think if you want to say use diamonds to buy stamina, it should cost way less. And I can understand if they don't want to have giving out stockpiles of huge stamina potions all the time, but it is a much more malleable format than just chucking stamina onto our account. I have some suggestions on what I think can solve this later. Anyway, so the last and final point is quite a hostile stance to take, but I've kind of had enough with the developers at this point. It is actually very, very hard to trust the developers. I genuinely don't have any faith in them anymore in what they're saying or doing. Simply because for the longest time I believed that the Lords were a different summon rate. I remember disagreeing with some people on the official Discord saying, well look, it's clearly a different rate. There's these guys who have whaled like crazy and they still haven't pulled 2 of the Lords and they are buying like insane amounts. You look at other people and you realize, barely anyone has a legendary Lord and barely anyone has epic Lords outside of the fusion events. So the developers realized that without Lords, players were weak, so they made fusion events to give people some epic Lords to help them get ahead. So then it kind of disguises the fact that they're incredibly rare, because oh look, everyone's got Lunaria, oh look, everyone's got Pyros, oh look, everyone's got Wrath. It's because they gave them to us, but only specifically. So you joined after those fusion events, and now you don't have them. You have Wrath, which is great, but again, look how important Wrath is to the teams. The Lord system kind of sucks, and the developers lied about it. They weren't honest. The summon rates just listed them all in one block and said, oh, this is how much chance there is to get an epic hero or a legendary hero. It included the Lords in the same block. That was just blatant lying. You got loads of people to spend money under the assumption that they had a good chance of getting those Lords, and they didn't. That's just lying, straight up. And there was enough shade and enough distrust thrown around in the Discord and on YouTube and other places that eventually the developers added, oh look, the Lords are actually like a fraction of the chance of the other heroes. And genuinely, since that update, I have seen way more Lords being pulled than before. So I suspect strongly that they massively boosted the rate as well. I reckon they were even rarer before. On top of that, there are epic heroes and legendary heroes that are summoned way less than other ones. How many of you have pulled a Deimos? Not many. Greed and Olag as well. These 3 epics seem to be especially rare. And you can say, oh, that's just how RNG works. I know it across server, guild, account, people, everyone seems to have trouble pulling a Deimos. I have loads of people I know who that's the only fighter they don't have on their account. There is just some shady stuff going on. Maybe he's just a Lord and it hasn't been announced yet, so he still has the summon rate, I don't know, for a new faction or something. So that's one thing. The dishonesty around the Lord summon rates really, really bothered me. Additionally, look at artifacts. If you fuse an artifact, everyone will know that you are going to fuse either the same couple, primarily defender and healer artifacts, and maybe you'll fuse Ajax's Rage. The new ones have definitely got much rarer rates on them because they're power creeped, they're just better. The Skull of Desecration for mages, I've only got one of them. I haven't got the new fighter one yet. I haven't got some of the new marksman ones yet. And it doesn't say that anywhere. It just says, oh no, this is that rate. The mythic one's this rate. It's not. It's not. Just be honest. Tell us what the actual rates are. Stop hiding this crap. Because we know. We're not dumb. We're all playing the game. We're all communicating. And everyone knows, oh look, certain things are really rare. When I fuse a mythic item, I get always the same crap. And then another thing is skill ups. Skill up a legendary hero, and how many times is it going to roll into the ultimate skill before maxing the other 2 passives? Almost always you will max the first 2 passives before getting a single roll into the ultimate. And now they're making legendary skill crystals rare. So how are you supposed to build legendary heroes? Oh, you have to spend money, I guess. So I'm going a little bit harsh here, but I've kind of had enough of the dishonesty. Tell us what the rates are on things. So long as things are honest, I think you can justify it. But when you start lying about stuff, it becomes very hard to take your side. There's just so much waiting going on behind the scenes in this game around how things are generating, that you kind of get screwed and you don't really know about it until you start talking about it with other people and you realize, oh look, so he's getting the same problem that I'm having. None of us are pulling Lords. None of us are skilling up our ultimates without maxing out every skill on the hero. None of us are getting artifacts that we want to get because we're always getting the same crap ones. There's just a lot of dishonesty from the developers around the rates in this game. So yeah, kind of a long rant, but it's just hard to trust them. Like the new Valentine's event with Silas and Vierna on the 10 times. I've seen loads more people getting Vierna than Silas. And people are saying, well, clearly Silas has a lower chance of being summoned than Vierna. And genuinely at this point, I'm like, yeah, probably, man. After spending like over a year with Lords being, the same rate as other heroes. No. It says they're both 10 times, so they're both, you can't trust them. How can you be so sure after all of the other fudging that goes into the numbers of this game? I have a big issue at the moment with how the developers are handling the transparency. At the moment, they're losing much of the goodwill that they had with the community just by keep knocking down our resources, by hiding rates, by deliberately making things harder to get and not telling us, massively nerfing the events, massively nerfing our reserves, our supplies, our skill ups, all of these things. It kind of just damages the goodwill with the community, which is not a smart thing to do going forward. So whoever is making the decisions, we say developers, we don't mean the actual developers, we mean the decision makers at Moonton. Whoever's doing that, I think you need to really reconsider. And the main reason I think you're kind of screwing this up is you are not Raid. And I think this needs to be made abundantly clear. Everyone takes a big dump on Raid for a lot of very genuine reasons, and you haven't gone that far yet. However, Raid has years of content. That game is stacked with all kinds of systems, all kinds of raids and dungeons and depths and guild versus guild and all this massive amounts of content. They have tower, they have faction raids, and they have all this massive depth of progression systems. So even though people despise what Plarium are doing with that game, they acknowledge that there's a lot to do, and that's why they stick around, because there's a lot of content and there's a lot of stuff for them to enjoy and to play. They hate the developers' movements, but they like the core game. What's happening in Watcher of Realms is we're kind of slowly shifting that way. We're killing the players' access to core resources. We're making it hard for them to progress. But we don't have that content. If you take away my ability to farm gear raids because I don't have stamina, I stop playing the game because I don't have things to progress. I'll log on and do my guild boss twice a day, which takes me about 5 minutes, if that, because I want to support my guild, but that's all I need to do, really. I can ignore everything else. It doesn't matter to me. Like farming this right now, you've seen the stuff I've been getting out of this. It's all garbage. So it doesn't matter to me if I don't farm every day. I have no incentive to spend money right now, that's for sure. Like, what am I going to be progressing? Like, I'm just rolling RNG dice to get new heroes? Some people will, for sure. But my point is, you don't have the breadth of content that Raid does. So if you start pushing your players in a way that they're not enjoying, that's really going to start hurting their ability to play the game, they don't have reasons to play. There aren't progression systems. The end game players who are playing now are just playing out of love. They just enjoy the game. And if you make it hard for them to enjoy the base game with the little content that they have at the end, they'll stop playing because there's nothing for them to do. Leveling up my Pantheon is just something that happens every day. I don't actually have to level up or get any stronger for that. Damaging the goodwill with the community for no reason when the community is already hanging on just because they enjoy the base game is not a good idea. To summarize at the end, I kind of want to put forward some suggestions on what I think could help solve some of these problems. So one of the problems listed was there's a lack of late game progression systems and the Lord benefits are too strong. I think it would be cool if we could tie these together. This is quite a radical change, but I think the Lord system should be kind of lifted off of the heroes. Pyros and Morrigan and all those people should no longer be Lords. You should take Lords off of the heroes and you should have a faction system instead. And we should have a way of leveling up factions with a resource. We should be able to choose which faction we level up. I don't know how we would get the resource, but I think it would be really cool if we could get hold of a resource and we could choose how to spend it. But if we can choose which factions we want to level up, and then leveling up the faction will level up those Lord benefits. So it will increase the benefits of the team without needing to pull the hero, but it gives us something to work towards. It's a progression system. It's an end game goal. That way, someone like myself will say, oh, well, I have a very strong Nightmare team, so I'm going to focus on leveling up my Nightmare faction. I think that would be cool, so that we can progress and power up our factions individually, and you choose which ones to focus on. Because at the moment, the Esoteria faction have some very interesting heroes, such as Carmet and Laurel. There's a bunch of them that seem quite cool, but you can't really use them as effectively without a Lord versus an Infernal or a Nightmare team where you do have the Lord. And in my opinion, it's a massive problem with loads of the heroes. Selene is vastly considered a very, very poor legendary hero, but she might be very good with Venoma. However, most of the players will never know that because barely any players are going to pull Venoma. However, if you could choose to power up the Esoteria faction by grinding or powering up a resource or spending resources or whatever, how you want to do the system, then people might get more use out of niche heroes because you have more incentive to build those things. And for late game players, if I have managed to max out Nightmare and Infernal, then I'll just start working on Esoteria. It gives me another thing to progress that I think could be very fun. So that was my suggestion on how to add an extra late game progression system as well as solve the problem with Lords. I think it would actually be good for the game. So that's my opinion on that one. Alternatively, if you don't want to go that route, a way to solve a lack of fusion heroes is just to make all of the epic Lords fusable. If you were going to have fusion events for them in the past anyway, just make them fusion heroes. Don't just dick on players who are new to the game and didn't get those events. Just make them permanently fusable. That adds more fusion heroes. It adds more team comp opportunities. Now the next one, for the lack of mechanics in the game, every hero just dealing damage and almost every content in the game being beaten by raw damage, I would suggest that the game needs to add accuracy and resistance stats. It's kind of typical in most gachas. If you want to land a debuff, you need a higher accuracy. If the enemy has higher resistance, you need more accuracy to have a better chance of beating their resistance. If you're in a dungeon where there is massive debuffs that will kill you, then you need resistance so that you can resist it, and you need healers that can cleanse. Now, funny I say this, because if you have a look, Eloin's ultimate dispels all debuffs for all allies. So they have this concept already of dispelling debuffs, yet no content really needs it at the moment. I think it would be a good thing if you added a bit more complexity to the system, added accuracy and added resistance. One of the reasons for this is all the heroes are built the same at the moment. I get loads of comments and videos, how do I build this hero? How do I build that hero? The reality is if it's a DPS, it's the same every time. Go for 100% crit rate and then balance attack and crit damage. It's the same on every single damage dealer in the game. There is almost no exception to this rule. There would be if you had accuracy. Because someone like Silas would not care for accuracy. However, someone like Salazar, who really wants to be applying bleeds, would want accuracy. So I think adding those systems would help a lot. Then you can start adding poison heroes to the game, bomb heroes, whatever else you want to do to make the game a bit more in-depth and a bit more complicated. Then you can have dungeons where the bosses apply massive debuffs and you need to cleanse them, or you need high resistance so that you don't get the debuff on you. It would make defenders more useful because maybe they could have self-cleansing or AoE cleansing. I think it would just be a better system to make the game a bit more complicated and give the developers more chances and opportunities to build interesting raids in future. As for heroes being more impactful than gear, I think this is quite a difficult one to solve. I think taking out the Lord system would help massively and make it so that's a progression system rather than a hero. I think that would help make heroes less of a big deal compared to just actually gearing up. I think one of the reasons why gear isn't that valuable is because the gear sets in this game suck massively. They just give you some arbitrary stat boost. That's not really what a gear set is supposed to do, in my opinion. Gear sets should unlock additional powers for your hero, maybe give them a chance to stun on hit, give them lifesteal, you know, the typical systems that other games have done. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but these things are there because they give some complexity to the heroes and give them options in how they can be built. Again, in this game, you can't really have that many options. Either you build them with crit damage, you build them with attack, you build them with some bonus damage. It kind of just results in the same thing of they do more damage, right? It doesn't have enough depth to that system, and it means that heroes are just going to be stronger because there's a limit in how much more powerful you can make your heroes with gear. The other issue I mentioned with PvP and Arena being incredibly poor, this is a very hard one to solve due to the nature of a tower defense game. I'm not exactly sure how they would want to go about this. I think their current methodology is not correct though. Personally, I think asymmetrical PvP would be better. Having us fighting a mirror match is not really working at the moment. It's not interesting, it's not fun, it's not dynamic. I think asymmetry would be better. Have it so that we are defending against an offense from them or something of the like. But at the moment, the system that exists just is not working. I don't have great suggestions on this, so if you guys have some ideas, then leave a comment below. It'd be interesting to hear what other people think. One of the other issues, which is developers seem to be determined to reduce our stamina. I think this is simply solved by just making stamina cost less. At the moment it's 60 if you buy a refill outright. Make it cost 40 and be done with it. Just remove the other sources, make it cost 40 for a refill, and that will feel much more palatable to the community. Then they can just stockpile diamonds, and when they want to play they can buy stamina for 40. Buying it for 60 is pretty poor. And the last big issue with the hard to trust developers, you kind of just need to win back the community faith at the moment. Most of the old players like myself, I think I can include myself an older player at this point, we are not particularly trusting anymore after seeing these releases, after knowing that things are being fudged. So you just need to actually make some effort to win back the community's trust, because at the moment it's in the gutter. You need to be more honest about things. If you want it so that people have to struggle a bit more with the artifact fragment raids, then add ancient mythic artifacts and make it clear that they are special and they are a different rate. Don't just say they're the same rate and then hide it. That's not a good way to win your community over. In these games, people will run stats, people will take this thing seriously, because it can cost a lot of money to play these games if you want to be competitive. My friend and I have been running a graph so that we can test the drop rates on gear. We have hundreds of entries already, and we're looking and seeing the discrepancies in stat drops from raids. So it's very easy for people to test this. It just takes a bit of patience. So don't treat your community like fools. They will eventually find out when you're fudging things, and when they do, it will damage your community reputation massively. So take it seriously. When you say something is a certain chance, when you say something is equal, make sure it's bloody equal, because otherwise you're just going to really damage the goodwill with the community. After a long time of ranting, I think I'm going to probably stop there. That kind of summarizes my main issues with the game at the moment. I think there's actually a really good game lying underneath this. I think the decision makers at Moonton just need to really consider what it is they're trying to do with this game. They need to stop trying to milk the game. It is too young in its development. There is not enough content and not enough features. If you start pushing the community against a wall, they will just leave and find a game that has more content. If you're going to get milked either way, you might as well just go for one that has more stuff for you to do in it. At the moment, most people are playing Watcher of Realms because of the potential. So I'm really hoping that the developers take the time to reconsider some of the changes they've made recently, and I hope that they do implement some changes to improve the game and not just make it harder for the players. I understand that they are leading up to a global launch at the moment, and they do need to change some systems and to reel some things in for balancing sake. However, a lot of the recent changes, the nerfing of events, the nerfing of stamina, does not feel like this. It feels like they're just trying to soak money out of people. I've typically been on the developer's side with these things, but in these scenarios, I think it's a bad decision, and it does feel like a money grab to me. So really hoping the developers do take some feedback on board, and I really hope that they start moving the game in a better direction, because the recent patches this year have not been particularly good, and they've not really given us a lot of hope, to be frank. So that's the end of my very, very long rant. Apologies for the long video. I hope it was interesting to some of you, and I hope some people at Moonton are listening, and that perhaps they will reach out to the community and see if other people share my opinions and thoughts. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care. Wish you all the best. Bye-bye.